Let's raise the big questions tonight. Is the press being gagged as is being alleged because of these raids? Is this another attempt, as is being suggested, to intimidate any critical media? Are the optics terrible for the Modi government, especially at a time when it leads the G20? Does the BBC need to answer first to its tax charges? Some of the questions we'll raise. First, N. Ram, director of the Hindu Publishing Group, one of the country's senior-most journalists, former editor-in-chief of the Hindu. Dr. Sanjay Baru, senior journalist, been political commentator, worked with the Manmohan Singh government, policy analyst, joins me. I'll also be joined, and that's Mahesh Jetpalani. You can see that was an interview we did earlier. Also a Conservative MP will join us, Bob Blackman. He's been critical of the BJP. Ashish Ray, London-based broadcaster, is also with us. But I'm going to therefore come to the three journalists, Sanjay Baru, N. Ram, and Ashish Ray. To you, Mr. Ram, first. What's your first reaction to reports that the BBC's offices are raided in Mumbai and Delhi?
Sorry?
Your first reactions to the raids?
I was shocked at the over-the-top and brazenly foolish action by the income tax authorities. Nobody is going to be fooled by the story they put out that they are investigating these possible irregularities. These allegations have been made. It's clearly to do with their intolerance of what was put out by the BBC. So my first reaction was surprise, but but then I saw the great folly involved in it. It's a comedy of follies here.
Why do you say that? Why do you say it's a comedy of follies, Mr. Ram?
Because first they blocked episode 1 of this. This was not going to be widely watched in India. It was for the UK audience, the episode 1 of the BBC documentary titled India, the Modi Question. The act of blocking it, the Streisand effect, as it's called, came into play. So, and then this follows immediately. Nobody is going to be fooled by the story, the pretext put out by unnamed sources. These sources won't even come on record. And I'm surprised that the media are giving them play. Government sources say, or income tax sources say, and this is just bad journalism. Let them come on record and say what it's about. Let somebody who has a name, a senior position in the income tax department or representing the government come out and say what this is all about. And as the Editors Guild has pointed out, Rajdeep, this is part of a pattern. It was against NewsClick, it was against News Laundry, it was against Dainik Bhaskar, and then NewsClick was also the enforcement directorate went after them. And nobody's taken in by the cover-up stories that are put out to justify these anti-democratic actions, probably illegal actions as well.
You're using very strong words. You're saying it's anti-democratic, it's illegal. Dr. Sanjay Baru, your first reactions? Do you believe it's anti-democratic and anti-Indian, or should we hold our horses till we find out what exactly does the income tax have before us on the BBC?
Well, the timing of this whole thing certainly makes one believe that there is more to it than simply transfer pricing problems or tax in evasion problems. I think there has been a systematic campaign against the media. BBC has been criticized by very responsible members of the government. And it's not the only newspaper, as Ram has mentioned. It's not the only media organization that has been at the receiving end. Incidentally, I have myself been censored in the media for saying things which the editors of the newspapers or magazines where I've written felt that this would offend people in power. So we are living in a regime of increasing censorship, and these actions are meant to warn others that not to walk down this path. I do believe that we are in a sense in an environment that I, as a student in the mid-70s, saw during the emergency era. BBC was one of the targets of the emergency era. We are back to that kind of targeting of the media, which is counterproductive. Frankly, as Ram said, I mean, more people watched the documentary after it was banned than before it.
Are you likening what you've seen today to the emergency? Are you saying these are shades of what you as a young student heard or saw during the emergency?
not just today, I mean, for the last several months, many actions, the use of investigation agencies against the, media, against businessmen. There is an implicit kind of terror atmosphere. I used to be in the business media, as you know, and therefore I talk to a lot of business people. There's a lot of fear. So there is an atmosphere of fear. It's a fact. Which I think is counterproductive, because I've always said this: here is a government that enjoys an absolute majority in parliament. Why should they go after all of this? I mean, in what way does the position of Mr. Modi get affected by a BBC documentary? Whether that was good or not is a different issue. I mean, I've been a critic of the BBC in the past. They used to use the word militant for terrorists. I have, in my writings, criticized the BBC on their coverage of India. But that doesn't mean I harass them and I ban them. We never banned, during my period in the Prime Minister's office, any newspaper organization that was critical of the government, that was critical of Manmohan Singh. A lot of them were. And many of them today are, defending this government, were very, very critical of the Prime Minister then. But nobody banned them, nobody harassed them, no income tax department went after them. When you have such an overwhelming majority in Parliament, what is this fear and this intolerance of criticism or of questioning? This is really counterproductive. It's not good for the country's image. Let me say, this is just not good for India's image as a democracy.
Those are very strong words also now coming in from Sanjay Banu. Also with us, as I said, Ashish Ray. He's been a broadcaster for years, based in London and with the BBC at times. How do you see, Mr. Ray, this playing out globally, especially in Britain where you are? The BBC's office is being raided. The IT department claims through sources that the BBC has committed violations which they are exploring.
I think it's a horrendous mistake on the part of the Modi government. Even if the documentary on Narendra Modi had done a certain amount of damage to Narendra Modi's already terrible reputation, I think this will get worse, because the story would gradually have gone away. But now it's been revived, and international media, worth its salt anywhere, will now take a very wary look at India, and especially a government which is clearly determined to destroy democracy in India.
What role do you see actually the British government playing? Will the British government also take a dim view of this? Because so far the Sunak government has stayed away from this whole controversy, almost backed Prime Minister Modi.
Well, first of all, the BBC has nothing to do with the British government. It's an independent organization. It's funded by license payers in the United Kingdom, and therefore the British government does not have a say on this matter one way or the other. However, the British Foreign Office and the British Prime Minister's office would be extremely annoyed by the reaction of the Narendra Modi government to what was, in most people's view, a perfectly legitimate documentary on his role in the 2002 Gujarat riots.
Okay, let me go to an interview I did earlier, though, with Conservative MP for a moment, Bob Black. He's been critical of the BBC. Mr. Black, do you believe that the BBC is being unfairly targeted by the Indian government because it aired this documentary on the Gujarat violence a month ago?
No, I don't. I think the reality is that obviously there is concern from the Indian authorities. They must investigate appropriately. I've no evidence or understanding of what the allegations are, if there are any, or whether it's just part of an audit. The BBC, as an independent organisation, should be cooperating with the Indian tax authorities. I'm sure they are, and that all documentation will be provided and full cooperation from the employees. And then I hope the matter will be resolved very quickly.
How will this play out in your country, Mr. Blackman? Will the Rishi Sunak government speak up for the BBC at all?
The position is that the BBC is an independent organisation. They are not an arm of government. BBC obviously report through Ofcom, and then the Ofcom reports to the Culture Secretary. From our perspective, obviously, if there are concerns about what the BBC is doing internationally, we obviously have to look at that from the Foreign and Commonwealth Office perspective. But it is clear this is not an arm of government, and it's for the BBC as an independent organisation to operate fully and properly as we would expect, and therefore it is not for the British government to comment one way or the other.
But do you see this as a freedom of press issue, Mr. Blackman, or do you believe the BBC must face the law in this country?
No, the fact is that when I talk about freedom of speech, I believe passionately that people should have the power and ability to speak freely, but also be challenged on what they have to say. And that's part of that challenge that is important. So the BBC has a vitally important role to play of challenging people, challenging politicians and others appropriately. But that is, it's not a one-way exercise, and it certainly shouldn't be. The BBC should not be used as a propaganda tool, either by the UK government or by other governments, or other people that wish to portray other governments unfairly. So from that perspective, this is not about so much free speech as being having a position whereby appropriate usage is made of proper journalism. Proper journalism investigates and has cast transparency into matters that need to be investigated, quite rightly, and that is a role for independent journalists, and that is a role that I think the BBC historically has carried out extremely well. It is obviously unfortunate in many respects that they've chosen to put this documentary on, which is full of aspersions, innuendos and smears against both the Indian government and the Indian judiciary system. And I think from that perspective they got it wrong. But it was produced by an independent organisation separate from the BBC, overseen from an editorship by the BBC, and then broadcast. And that's the problem, that they've I think, caused themselves immense problems as a result.
And Ram, you want to respond before I go to Mahesh Jethmalani, who has a very different view? Do you want to respond to what you're hearing both from the Conservative MP and Ashish Ray, giving two very different perspectives there from London? An essential feeling, Mr. N. Ram, that the BBC is not above the law, is what Mr. Blackman says. Can we use freedom of press today to say, stay off, you cannot raid offices, or is it because it's part of a pattern that every time this government has been tested by a media organization, that organization finds itself in trouble? I'll give a listing here. Let me put up this graphic. Dainik Bhaskar was raided, Mr. Ram, after they exposed COVID 2.0. We've had websites that have been raided after they have put out stories critical of the government, whether it's The Wire, NewsClick, News Laundry. Do you see a pattern that is emerging increasingly? Is that what worries you? Or do you believe that we in the media also will have to look carefully at our own houses?
We in the media have to speak up more, be more independent and more challenging. I fully agree with Ashish Rai, and not at all with the Honourable Conservative MP. I don't know if he saw the documentary, because it was not casting aspersions. It gave full, it was balanced. It gave a full chance to the government to respond. They declined. It brought in apologists who responded on behalf of the government. It gave them a lot of time, including Swapan Das Gupta, our colleague, who put up a brave defense, but I would consider that mainly apology for the government, because it was based on facts. It was in fact a very good documentary, right. Episode 1 as episode 2. And I think I would completely disagree with the Conservative Party representative here,
and you are convinced that there is a direct link between the airing of the documentary and these raids?
Yes. Everybody sees that direct link. Everybody also sees why they tried to block episode 1, because it was about the reason given. There was nothing against the Supreme Court. In fact, it talked about accountability, and it talked about the SIT not being, reporting to the Supreme Court saying there's not enough evidence to justify prosecution. But the real reason, as everyone knows, the elephant in the room was that it looked at, then Chief Minister Narendra Modi's role or his accountability for the pogrom, 2002 pogrom, where a very large number of Muslims have been massacred. Also Hindus were killed. All that was brought out. The Godra, it did full justice to Godhra atrocity. It didn't say they set fire to themselves. Those who went, the pilgrims and others, the activists. It said Muslim extremists had done this and so on. I think it was a perfectly balanced documentary. It was based on, it was an attempt at truth-telling.
Right.
And to say that cast aspersions, I think is profoundly unfair. I totally disagree with it, and I think he's doing injustice to the BBC's professionalism.
You're talking about the BBC's professionalism. I want both you and Dr. Baru to listen in to this, the other side. Just hold on and listen into this, because Mahesh Jethmalani is senior Supreme Court lawyer. He's also with the BJP and a nominated MP of the Rajya Sabha, and he's come out strongly against the BBC. And I asked him this question at the start. The search, Mahesh Jethmalani, of the income tax comes at a time within a month of the BBC airing a critical documentary on Prime Minister Modi. It also comes at a time when you, among others, have gone ahead and said that all of this is part of a Chinese propaganda, that BBC today is financed by Chinese state-owned companies, and therefore the BBC's finances need to be looked at. You want to expand on that?
Yeah, I have said that, and I've done this on Twitter, and whatever I've said on Twitter regarding the BBC, I mean, there have been a number of tweets. I have backed it up with with evidence that is in the public domain, and the BBC hasn't ever denied that. So, but you know, that doesn't mean that just because I've tweeted these raids have happened.
Now, are you questioning, I want clarity, are you questioning, Mahesh Jethmalani, the finances of the BBC? If the BBC has committed financial irregularities, surely that should have come out in the open by now by a British government inquiry. Are you convinced that the BBC is guilty of financial irregularities involving the Chinese?
Well, I'm certainly saying that because of the extent and quantum of financial interlocking, right, they are highly dependent on the Chinese. And to use the words of a British MP who was highly critical of the BBC and its financial shenanigans with the Chinese, right? Have my bread, you will sing my song.
You know, but you're saying this at a time when, let's be honest, Mr. Jethmalani, the BBC over the years has built a huge credibility as a fine journalistic organization. Are you saying all of that has to be thrown out of the window because according to you, and this is according to you, it is today funded by Chinese-owned companies? The fact is, a large part of the BBC's finances still come through the British taxpayer.
Well, this financial interlocking is not with the overseas, with the BBC in the UK. This financial interlocking is through an overseas entity controlled by the BBC called Storyworks. And most of the money, the funding comes into this company. All the Chinese state-owned financing is put through this company. And so there's a
you are with,
pardon the pun, a China wall between what happens in the UK, right, and what happens with stories which are publicized in places like India, right? So here it is Storyworks which really produces those documentaries. They are financed by the Chinese. They invest their pension funds with the Chinese, and so does BBC UK, right? Invest their funds, more than 150 million pounds, and there is this financial interlocking. And there is no other explanation why the BBC has persistently indulged in anti-India propaganda, right? Not publishing a flag of India without Jammu and Kashmir, constantly castigating and berating the Indian army, right? Often without cogent evidence, right? And the most latest episode, right? So it's about time, if you are, as your own MP says, and there's a lot of criticism about the BBC's Chinese financial links in the UK. It's all in the public domain, Rajdeep. You can read this. It's not just me who's saying it. It has rattled a lot of people and upset a lot of people who were former admirers. And I am a former admirer of the BBC, right? It was a very credible institution, but that doesn't mean that credible institutions can rely on past reputation and suck up money from the Chinese and then sing their song.
But you know, Mr. Jethmalani, just to clarify, this documentary was aired on BBC 2 in the United Kingdom. Are you saying, therefore, that no journalistic scrutiny took place because it was pure Chinese propaganda, in your view, to undermine the Modi government? Isn't that a bit of a stretch to suggest that because there is a Chinese company that you allegedly claim finances the BBC, that's why this documentary was done to undermine Prime Minister Modi?
No, it's not a stretch. It's not a stretch. It's not a stretch because I am going by extent and quantum of funding. I'm going by criticism in the UK by none other than a member of the parliamentary committee that liaisons on China, with Lord Alton. I'm also going by the nature of the extremely pernicious anti-India propaganda that they're spreading through this organization, Storyworks.
You know, with due regard, Mr. Jethmalani, when you keep saying anti-India propaganda, at times you almost seem to be sounding like Indira Gandhi in the 1970s. You know, this is how she tried to drive out the BBC out of the country. You know, my point is, this is a majority government. You've got all the power. Why are you worried about what a BBC documentary is? To call it part of anti-India propaganda only makes that documentary appear even bigger than it is, as I said. I mean, are you in a way, isn't that a bit of a self-goal, a stretch?
Well, what is a bit of a stretch is that the Indian Prime Minister has been hauled over the coals in this country, right? By an SIT monitored by the court, no less, right? It has also been cleared by the courts. The Gujarat riot episode has been dealt with in detail. There's been a searching inquiry. There's a reasoned judgment. The BBC now arrogates itself to itself because it has a past reputation. And I make this charge, right? The right to overrule all that without any cogent evidence, relying particularly, and I haven't come out with everything on the BBC yet, right? Relying upon an inquiry by a gentleman called Jack Straw, who was Foreign Secretary in 2002 at the time of the riots, who himself is under a very serious cloud, not just for a false report on the weapons of mass destruction issue regarding Iraq, but for his conduct and role in the matter of having this inquiry and the report propagated in 2002.
You know, you're going into Jack Straw's credibility. You have every right to speak up. But, you know, the whole question arises, let's look at what has been your central argument, that the BBC has questionable finances. Now, at no stage do I see the Sunak government saying that. It seems that Mahesh Jethmalani, sitting here in India after this documentary is aired, is suddenly saying it.
No, sorry, Rajdeep, you can't get away with that. No less a person than Prime Minister Sunak has completely rejected the BBC report.
That's the documentary. I'm talking about your charges.
It's not worth the paper on which it's written.
No, I'm talking about your charges, Mr. Jethmalani, of financial irregularity. Please show me where the BBC has found its finances now being questioned by the British government.
They have. I'm telling you that you please read my tweets and read the supporting evidence and then make up your mind. Have you read all those? Have you read all those articles I've annexed to my tweets? Have you read other material in the public domain about the BBC's Chinese financing?
Have you?
No, have you?
I have, and I want to understand clearly. Are you suggesting today that the IT raids that took today, therefore, are based on this evidence which you claim is in the domain about Chinese involvement, or are you delinking the two?
No. Now we're on an inductive leap here. You are attributing an inductive leap to me. I am not suggesting that. Please don't make false assumptions. Right? Don't put words in my mouth. I am not saying that at all, Rajdeep. I am not saying the income tax has a right. There's a presumption of constitutionality and legality, even though people of your ilk might not think so, of their actions. You have to judge them with the results of this survey, not now. To jump and scream murder and murder foul at this stage is a little premature. I would hold my horses before you have egg on your face, Rajdeep.
No. Are you therefore telling me in conclusion that please do not call it a murder of the free press merely on the fact that the BBC has been raided today? That's your central point. Am I correct?
I fully agree with you. I think for once you put my thoughts pretty accurately. That's all I'm saying regarding the IT raids. As regards BBC's financial interlocking with the Chinese companies, it's all there in the public domain.
Are you also saying a warning should be sent to the BBC, a ban imposed on the BBC? Is that what Mahesh Jethmalani is calling for?
No, I'm not going that far at all. I'm at this stage, so far as the IT raids are concerned, Rajdeep, I am at this stage confining myself to saying, let's see, maybe the optics are bad because it comes in the wake of the BBC documentary, right? But give the IT department a chance to come out with the material on the basis of which they have initiated this survey and any raids that might follow. And let us see what comes if they come out with any evidence of financial irregularities. Already there's some talk of transfer pricing violations and all that, but I don't even want to get into that realm because it's too premature.
One final question. Do you believe this hurts India's image, brand Modi's image, G20 here? Here we are seen raiding the BBC and calling it a Bhrasht organization.
No, I think globally India will be seen as a country which does not like unwarranted reports which are basically initiated at the instance of enemies of this country. Okay. We will be able to establish that, I feel. And also that we should not take this kind of nonsense from institutions who are resting on their past laurels, but today are extremely tainted financially.
Strong words from Mahesh Jethmalani. You've heard the other side. N. Ram, Sanjay Baru. Now I want you to respond. Dr. Baru, how do you respond to what you are hearing? We are hearing enemies of the state, anti-India propaganda. These were the words that Indira Gandhi would use with the foreign hand.
No, I think I should now be looking at a book on the history of this conspiracy theories in India. Every government looks at a foreign hand whenever it is under attack at home. So frankly, I'm not defending the BBC here, Rajdeep. I'm saying that this kind of a systematic attack on the media which has been going on, it's part of a pattern. Harassment either directly through this kind of investigation, IT raids, for example, on the wire, etc., or very much more subtle. I mean, I know I interact with enough number of journalists in this country, around the country. There has been a lot of harassment of people in the media. So there is a pattern. And that is what I'm worried about. If BBC has done something wrong and the government goes after them, that's part of the government's responsibility. I'm not worried about the reputation of the BBC. I'm worried about the pattern where the BBC incident comes after a report on the Prime Minister and there is a direct political attack. It's one thing for the IT to go after the BBC. It's another thing for a BJP spokesperson to call it Bhrasht or something, organization. I mean, this is a political attack on the BBC. So let us look at the two separately.
Right.
Income tax is doing an investigation into the financial dealings of the BBC. That's part of government's job. But when a political party attacks the BJP, then you see it's part of a pattern where anyone who's critical of the government is under attack. And there is this fear among the media. You know it, I know it. We don't, many of us don't talk about it, but it's there. And I think that is what worries me much more. And this conspiracy theory that there's some foreign hand out to denigrate India, out to destabilize India, we've heard it before. Foreign hands have come.
And particularly since, ironically, the Chinese in particular, the BBC has been very critical of China. I mean, if you look at the BBC's reportage, they've been extremely critical of China as well. So, N. Ram, are you a bit...
But the Chinese companies, let me just add one more thing on this.
Yes.
Chinese companies have been active in the West and in India, and they have been funding programs. I mean, you have Chinese companies that advertise in cricket matches in India, that advertise on television on India, right? So there are companies that are advertising and there are companies that are investing. There are many Chinese companies that are doing business today in India. Why are we allowing that?
Absolutely. And in fact, our trade deficit, of course, with China has risen astronomically in recent times. But N. Ram, a concluding remark from you. I mean, you're seeing which way the narrative is playing out. The BJP is saying that the BBC is an anti-India organization. It is, links with China are being found. How do you respond? Are we, as you said at the start, making this as committing one self goal after the other?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. I'm astonished to hear what Mr. Mahesh Jethmalani said. It was an exercise in irrelevance. On the one hand, he attacked the BJP, I mean the BBC, for the China connection, whatever it is. I've not seen that evidence. But then the big question is, what has that got to do with BBC Two? It's financed by the license fee system. It's accountable. The regulator is Ofcom, and so on. What has this got to do with it? And as you mentioned, Rajdeep, the BBC is very strongly against China in all its, to the extent I would say that's almost propaganda. If you read, I follow the website. So it's I'm astonished to hear that this is the reason for demonizing the BBC in India. And then he says there's no connection with the IT raid. So what's it all about? It's an exercise in irrelevance. Talking total lack of connection.
So what according to you, Mr. Ram, is the way ahead? Because I'm going to one last time put out that graphic because, at the end of the day, timing matters in politics. Take a look once again, viewers, at exactly why, the media is worried. Raid on Dainik Bhaskar group comes soon after the group had exposed the manner in which during the second wave of COVID, there were bodies that were found floating in the Ganga. We've seen raids taking place at a Bharat Samachar office also after that channel had exposed COVID mismanagement in UP. We've seen IT raids taking place on news portals after they too had put out or allegedly critical stories. We've seen the Center for Policy Research being surveyed after some of the people who write for it allegedly have written critical articles of the government. What's the larger message, Ram? As someone who was there during the emergency years and someone who's seeing it now, should we be drawing the parallels that Dr. Baru is drawing, or is that a bit of a stretch?
I fully agree with Sanjay on what he said. I don't think he equated it with the emergency. That was total censorship. Today there are spaces, including this program, where you can raise critical questions. You couldn't do that during the emergency. But having said that, the message is, this is a government that imposes censorship. It's selective censorship. And in fact, going beyond the media, you see the lack of regulatory action on the Adani affair. The whole thing, we still don't have answers. If the government wants to give something to the Supreme Court, they want to give it in a sealed cover on regulation itself, saying the markets are going to be disturbed and so on. So this is clear. There's clearly an agenda here, selective targeting of critical voices, oppositional voices, particularly online, but also in the other media. So the message is that, the New York Times had an editorial about 2 days ago on this, linking all these issues which Sanjay referred to, and they also added the killings of journalists, the completely unjustified imprisonment of journalists for a long period of time. This didn't happen before, except during the emergency. So I don't draw that parallel. Let that be treated separately.
Right.
But this is a regime. This is creeping censorship, and it's creeping pretty quickly now.
Okay. Those are words which hopefully are salutary words, which hopefully someone out there is listening. This is a space, and we are grateful that we have a space where we can raise these questions. So we still will continue to fight in a way from our independent corner. But can, in a way, the government also recognize that the optics are just terrible at the moment of the way this is playing out? Sanjay Baru, N. Ram, all my other guests, Ashish Ray and others who joined us, thank you so much for joining me now.